Here are some ways to get started when you're faced with that blank piece of paper. One thing I like to do is what I call blind doodles or blind mark making. That's simply dipping my paintbrush or maybe even a stick. I might just step outside and get a stick and dip that into some paint, close my eyes, and then just make some marks on the page. Just doodle a bit, see what happens. I find that if I close my eyes, it's a lot freer, and I don't fall into the trap of doing the same old, same old. Okay, open my eyes. Kind of like what I've got going there. Now that's just the start. It may not even turn out to be a painting with any blue in it, but it just got me going. And after it dries, I'll go back, take a look at it, and see where I want to go with it. A variation on the blind mark making or blind doodling is making a certain shape with your non-dominant hand. So I'm right-handed, and I would put the paintbrush in my left hand and then decide what shape I want to make. And I'm going to make some repeated shapes. So I could make circles, those are always fun, but for a change today I think I'll make triangles. So I'll just make a bunch of triangles. And they're going to look quite different using my non-dominant hand compared to, let's see what they look like just for fun when I use my dominant hand. Using my dominant hand, I can make good triangles. In a way, not quite as interesting as the ones with my non-dominant hand. The dominant hand ones, they're quite regular. Non-dominant, they're a little bit wigglier, and I think make more interesting shapes. So that's what I might do. I could come back in and do something else. Maybe I might want to do some circles inside each one. And again, what I'm doing right now may not even end up in the painting. It's just beginnings. And after it dries, I can come back, I can take a look at it and see what I think. If I want to keep any of it, if it suggests anything to me that I like. Another fun thing is to do some mark making with words. So what I'm going to do is write my name. And maybe I'll write it again. Maybe this time I'll do it with the stick. And I might make it up here. Might make a bunch of these down here. Got some gloopy stuff on there, so there's no rules. Just because I said I was going to be writing the name using a stick doesn't mean I can't stick my finger in there and smooth out some stuff. Because it's all about just making a random beginning. Somehow that's feeling like it wants some red. Now, the trick is when you're making these beginnings, don't get carried away trying to make a whole painting, because that's not the idea. The idea is just a beginning. But I just felt some red would be nice in there. And when you think about it, why did I put some red in there and in there? If I had a blank piece of paper, I probably wouldn't have put red in there. But because I had those shapes from writing my name, it felt natural for me to fill in those shapes with the red. And I kind of like the way it looks. Here comes my favorite one, and the one that I probably use the most often. And this is what I just call the clean your brushes technique. When I'm working on a, quote, real painting, I usually have a piece of paper or even another canvas beside me, and instead of wiping my brush off on a piece of cloth, a rag, or dipping it in water, I like to just go like this and clean it off on the other support, the paper or the canvas. That's my kind of my wiping one. You know, and you can see here, I just wiped off my stick. That's some interesting mark making going on there. And then what can happen is that as your painting session carries on and you have different paint brushes, you've used different paint colors, and you're just cleaning them off on this one, there have been times where I have ended up with something that is actually more beautiful than the painting that I've been laboring on all afternoon. And I think that's because you get unexpected color combinations, and also it's just the freedom that ends up happening. So for instance, right here, I'm just really liking how this red is butting up against the white, and who would have ever thought that this mauvey pink would go with that red in such an interesting way. So if I was to come back to this at some point, say it was all dry and I would come back to it and think, okay, now what am I going to make here? There might be parts of it, maybe this blue I decide, don't want that. I can just paint it right out and I can just save the parts that I like. A fun way to develop a surface is just swiping paint on with an old credit card. So here I've got some paint on here, just swipe it on. I have a tendency to overwork my paintings, so a little trick that I do is starting out by masking off some things. So I'll often start just by putting some masking tape on. You can do big ones, little ones, you can cut it into shapes, you could make letters. For instance, I could make this a T on an angle. So you've got some masking tape bits going, and then whatever you do, if you get carried away, you've always got some of your plain paper, something really quiet and nice underneath that has been reserved. So let's see what happens if I do some scraping over top of this. Oh, just for fun, let's do something different. Let's do some of this kind of mark. Okay. And I've got some nice reserved areas, not to mention some nice, clean, hard edges, which is a nice contrast. So I like that. The reason why this tore, it wouldn't normally tear, but this is really cheap paper. This is actually just cardboard. Oh, and I've got some over here too. I'd forgotten about those ones. So typically if I was working on a real painting, I would have layers and layers and layers on here, and it would be getting darker and darker and possibly quite muddy. And then I would remember, oh, I've got that masking tape. Oh, lo and behold, you pull it off and you get a nice quiet area that's been reserved. Maybe you leave it quiet. Maybe you use it to put some text in or something. But that's a nice way to treat your beginning of your painting. Another fun way to get rid of the blank white page, is to do what I call a color swirl. So you can do a single color swirl, just get some paint, and just do some swirls. Or more than one color. So sometimes it's fun to put one color on one edge of the brush and then another color on the other, and you can get the two colors swirling together. So you go like that, you do the same thing, and you get a nice swirl like that. And of course, like all these techniques, the trick is not to get carried away trying to make it look perfect. It's a starting point. Let's see what happens though if I put some blue in with it. Where do I want the blue? Up here maybe. Ooh, I like that. Looking nice. Okay, so I have an interesting start, and I can go back after it's dry and decide what I want to do with it. I might want to look at it, see if it suggests anything to me. Might want to work on it some more, do more surface treatment. I might tear it up, cut it up, use it as a piece of painted, hand-painted paper in something else. So there's part of this that's starting to appeal to me. Not that part very much, but this part down here. There's something about this part that I'm liking. The blue up against that pink, and the texture in there. So I could even come back at a certain point, I could paint out all that and just leave that blue. And it could be a nice start. Turn it around, see what else I see in it. And then put it to the side, let it dry, and go on to something else while it dries.